It's now live.
Welcome everybody, members, officers and anybody watching on the YouTube channel to this Finance Audit and Risk Committee. Before the meeting starts, I will invite the committee member and the scrutiny officer to confirm that the officers joining remotely can hear and be heard. Louis, to you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just quickly run through that. Do we have Ian Cooper?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Do we have Ruben Ayavu?
Yeah, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Chalkley?
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. Nick Jennings?
Good evening.
Thank you. Ghulam Hussain?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Debbie Hanson?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much. Members can speak using the speak button on your microphone units. Your microphone won't be activated until you are called on to speak by the chair. Voting will be in the usual manner. Are there any questions before we start? No? Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we've had apologies from Councillors Sean Prendergast and Adam Ruggiero Chaka and Morgan Derbyshire. So that's we few tonight, folks. It's quality, not quantity tonight. Are there any other apologies? Don't think there's anybody else to apologise. No. Okay. Item 2 would be minutes of the last meeting. We don't have those available to vote on at this point, so they will hold over till next time. Notification of any other business, there is none. Just to do the usual announcements about the audio recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. There is no public participation, so we can go straight to item 6, the Annual Governance Statement 2020-21, and Ruben is to present that. He said, hopefully.
Yep, sorry, pressing buttons in a random order doesn't help, Chair. Thank you.
I was too quick for you, Ruben.
Absolutely. Thank you. The report in front of you is to seek the approval of the Annual Governance Statement for the year 2020-21 and the action plan from the committee. I'll just run through the key highlights. The statement itself sets out the council's governance arrangements for the 2021 period and proposes an action plan for the next financial year. It is a report that the committee saw in July as it sets out 5.1, and members were then asked to provide some feedback on that presented at the meeting. A copy was presented to the SIAS manager and Ernst & Young for comments, and 5.1 runs through some of those amendments there that we made off the back of those comments. Just to flow through those, some of the web links needed to be updated as our website was updated in July, and some didn't allow external users to access the documents we referred to, so we've changed those. In Principle D, we've provided a little bit more background around the aspects of the Corona Community Support Fund between June 20 and 21. Now, those have been put into the leadership self-assessment document, which has been uploaded to the website and will be sits alongside this statement. And then there's a little more clarification about the review of effectiveness, and we've provided updates on the complaints to cover the full period which we had, which came out in July, and then in regard to the standard complaints involving councillors, came out in October. The statement itself comes in advance of approving the statements of account, which is worked with you tonight, and then just to spin down to Appendix A, which is the statement which, once approved, will go on our website until the next review. Happy to take any questions, Chair and Committee.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any questions for the officer? No, that's all very straightforward then. So the recommendation is that the committee approves the amended annual governance statement and action plan Appendix A. Can we vote on that, please? All those in favour?
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. So we'll move on to item 7, which is the local code of corporate governance, and it's back to Ruben again for that.
Thank you, Chair. So again, we're seeking the approval of the local code for 2022. The code itself is reviewed annually and was updated this time last year. It's based on the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, which is CIFA for short. It's their framework around good governance in local governments. As it says, it's 7.1, and it is the basis for the assessment of the governance arrangement. So I think we've just done, we set out the principles for this year, which are 7 principles, A through to G. The document itself is at Appendix A. It hasn't changed very much other than at, let me spin down to the right section. Just after the principles, it sets out the council plan, which will be in place for 2022. So that's slightly changed, setting out the new vision and the 3 priorities there: people first, sustainability, and a brighter future together. And we will review this annually to make sure that it's a current and live document, and we'll monitor the arrangements through the review of the annual government statement itself. And that's kind of it, really. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks again for that. That seems pretty straightforward, but are there any questions of the officer? Councillor Hone. Terry.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be pedantic here, I'm sorry to say, but 1.1 says North Hertfordshire District Council. Should we not be changing that? I thought somebody somewhere along the line spent some money to change the name of the council. Should that not be North Herts Council now, or am I missing something?
I think there was some debate on that at overview and scrutiny last night. We seem to be in some points using North Herts Council and some points North Herts District Council. I think there was a concern about confusion with North Herts College. So I don't know what the outcome of that was. I don't know if
National Hurricane Centre as well.
Right. I don't know if there's anything that you can add to that, but we're still.
If I can advise that the legal entity remains North Hertfordshire District Council. So,
Okay.
So for the purposes of decisions, we are North Hertfordshire District Council, but in the body of reports, we are intending to be using North Herts Council, but not the acronym, to avoid any confusion.
Okay, clear as mud. Excellent. Okay. Given that we've had that response, can I see if there are any other questions for Ruben? If not, the recommendation that the government approves the local code of corporate governance 2022 Appendix A. All those in favour, please vote.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ruben. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, we go on to item 8, which is audit results report. And I'm pleased to welcome Debbie Hanson from Ernst & Young to present. Debbie, good evening. I hope.
Debbie, are you able to hear us?
Sorry?
Apologies, I can hear you. My Zoom
All
screen
right.
just disappeared for a moment for some reason, and it's now completely disappeared into the corner of my screen. So I wasn't able to unmute myself or go into video, but it has now reappeared, I think. So are you able to hear me?
Yes, and welcome, Debbie.
Welcome, thank you. Apologies, I could see you all and you just disappeared at the key moment. So thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to take you through our provisional audit results report. I will take the report as read, so I'm sure you'll be pleased I'm not going to take you through every page of the report. This is a report we're required to present to you once we've substantially completed our audit and before we issue our opinion on the financial statements. The purpose of the report is to highlight to the members of this committee the key risks that we identified, the work that we undertook to address those risks, and the conclusion from our audit work. I'm pleased to report that we have now substantially completed our audit of the accounts for the 2020-21 financial year. There are some areas of work that are subject to manager and my own review, and we're aiming to complete those over the next few weeks. Probably the main area of work that's still outstanding is our review of the council's property, plant and equipment, and I'll give you a brief update on that in a moment when I go through the report. On the basis of the work we've completed to date, we're expecting to issue an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, and we're also not expecting to have any matters to report in relation to the council's arrangements for value for money. So I think that's a positive outcome from the audit. What I'd like to do is take you through just the executive summary of the report and highlight a few key issues. So that starts on page 41 of your electronic pack. So we highlight to you, first of all, our scope update. So there's been no significant changes to our planned audit procedures from those reported to you back in February. We have updated our materiality based on the draft financial statements, and as a result, that's increased slightly, but not a significant change in materiality. As I've said, we haven't identified any additional risks or changes to risks as a result of our audit work. If I take you to the next page, page 42 on the electronic numbering, we've noted there that at the date of drafting this report, we hadn't identified any differences from the audit, be that corrected or uncorrected, other than some minor disclosure differences. Just as an update from that, we have actually now identified one adjusted difference of £651,000, which is a reduction in the pension fund liability reported in the accounts. The reason that difference has arisen is that the council has obtained an updated IS 19 report from the pension fund actuary, which has basically changed the asset values and therefore the resulting liability for the council. So basically the council produced its accounts based on a report back in May 2021, which was appropriate for the date accounts were produced. They then requested and obtained a subsequent report dated September 21, which had slightly different figures. So the accounts are now being amended to reflect those updated figures. So that's it's not a control weakness. It's really just an updated estimate that's being reflected in the amended financial statements. Also wanted to just highlight to you our value for money responsibilities. So there's the new Code of Audit Practice for 2020 changed our approach to value for money. So although we're still looking at the same overall conclusion, we now have 3 specified reporting criteria, which are listed in this report. So that's financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. The key change in relation to value for money is the fact that we have to consider specified criteria under each of those areas, and we have to report on each of those in something that we call the Auditor's Annual Report, which is in effect the replacement for the previous Annual Auditor's Letter, which some of you may remember. We report those subsequent to the issue of the audit opinion on the financial statements, and therefore in your audit opinion, we purely report by exception on value for money, which is why previously I said we will have no matters to report in relation to value for money in your audit opinion. Following on the value for money conclusion, I just wanted to briefly take you through some of the risk areas. Before doing that, I just wanted to note that one area we won't be able to complete on a timely basis is our work on the whole of government accounts, which we do on behalf of the NAO. The reason we can't do that is because the instructions for that work have not yet been issued, and we don't expect those to be issued till around July this year. Until we've actually received those instructions to confirm whether the council is below or above the threshold that requires audit procedures on that whole of government accounts submission, we cannot issue our audit certificate, which concludes the audit. This has no impact on the actual audit opinion on the financial statements or the value for money work, but it just means we can't issue our formal certificates. That issue is obviously not unique to North Hertfordshire. It's an issue which is impacting on every single local authority body for 2021. If I can then briefly take you through the areas we've noted as our risks on page 44. So we identified 2 fraud risks and 1 significant risk. So apologies, the valuation of investment properties should not have been noted as a fraud risk. That is just a risk of a significant risk. Pleased to note that we have substantially completed all of that work and we have not identified any issues in relation to the fraud risks that we identified. We've also substantially completed our work on investment properties and again are satisfied that those are supportable and materially accurate. We also highlighted some areas of focus in evaluation of property, plant and equipment, the valuation of pension liability, going concern disclosures, and also recognition of grant income associated with COVID-19. That last risk was because of the significant sums that all local authorities received during 2021 in relation to the impact of COVID. We haven't quite finished our work on property, plant and equipment yet, and we're currently waiting for our final report from our internal valuers. We're expecting to get that shortly. They have raised some further questions with us, which we'll be passing on to the council, mainly just for clarification and further information. So we're not expecting any significant issues to arise from that, but obviously until we've completed that work, we're not able to fully conclude on that. I've also noted in relation to pension liability, and we have got that additional difference of £651,000, which management are adjusting. We haven't identified any other issues. Our going concern procedures we undertake at the very end of the audit, because those procedures have to cover cash flow projections and reserves projections at least 12 months from the date of the audit report. So my understanding is management have provided us with the information up to the end of April 23, and we'll now be proceeding to complete our procedures on that information. We've also completed our work on grant income and haven't identified any issues in relation to that. I wasn't going to highlight anything else in the report. As I said, overall, I think it's very positive. No real errors identified. The only adjustment identified is purely related to the update of an estimate in relation to the pensions. So I think a good quality set of accounts, and we'd like to take this opportunity to thank the finance team for their support during the audits. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Debbie. So yeah, bearing in mind that there's still a little bit to be
There is.
signed off. Are there any questions? Councillor Hone, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome your comments. I think what it tells us is that, yes, the finance team are looking after it very well. The accounts of North Herts Council, which we're very pleased about, and also compliment to the portfolio holder, I guess, as well, because he's responsible for what happens here. So well done to the finance team and to maintain the sort of standards which we would expect, and also the audit team, particularly this team, looking at what we've done and how we've done it. So once again, congratulations to those involved. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Yes, I'll add my own congratulations to that as well. Right, Councillor Adam Compton. Adam.
I feel bad if I don't congratulate the portfolio holder at this point since everyone else is, so congratulations. It is a very good piece of work. It's actually very comprehensive. I've got no queries about the stuff that's there. It's all very well put down. The only thing is, because there's some things missing, is it possible if we could maybe have an update on those at the next meeting? I don't necessarily need this whole thing to come back, but obviously there are a few items outstanding. So could we maybe just have an update on those?
Yes, Chair, we'd be happy to do that. And I think if anything significant did arise from the completion of our final procedures, we would clearly bring that back through the committee. As I said, I don't expect that based on where we are on the audit, but we will bring an update to you. And obviously, if anything is significant, we'll bring that back.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much for that. So with all that in mind and lots of congratulations floating around, the recommendation is that the audit results report be noted by the committee. So if you would care to vote to note those.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again to Debbie Hanson from Ernst & Young for the presentation on that. We'll go on to agenda item 9, which is the Statement of Accounts 2020-21, and that's Ian Cooper to present. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. So this follows on from the previous report, and this includes the long document, which is our Statement of Accounts for 2020-2021. As you will see in the cover report, and if you find all the highlighted numbers, you will see we have adjusted, as previously mentioned, for that pension funds difference from the change in the date of the estimates. Because Ernst & Young haven't quite finished their work, we won't be signing off the accounts tonight, and that is the reason for the recommendation at 2.2 on the report, that on the basis of what's been said so far, we aren't expecting any material differences, in fact, hardly differences at all, which will happen between now and the completion of their work. So on that basis, we are asking this committee that if that comes to pass as expected, that you delegate to basically the chair of the committee to sign off the accounts on your behalf. And therefore that can happen hopefully by the end of this month or early next month, rather than just waiting till the next meeting of this committee, which will be in June time. So seeking that recommendation from you on the basis that, as you've hopefully heard, the accounts and audits is almost complete and nothing been found so far.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I think it's just will require a little bit of tidying up, won't it, after all? But as you say on 2.2, subject to the final audit results report not requiring any substantial changes, that we can delegate that. So questions to the officer, if there are any? No, if not, I'm going to go to the recommendations then, as set out, that the draft 2020-21 annual statement of accounts as set out in Appendix A be approved based on the draft audit results report, and that, subject to the final audit results report not requiring any substantial changes, the committee delegates the chair of the committee the final approval of the 2020-21 annual statement of accounts. This will include confirming that the chair of the committee can sign the statement of accounts to confirm that they have been approved by the committee. If you're happy with that, please vote now.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. So that's another one ticked off. We're now on to item 10, which is the Shared Anti-Fraud Service Proposed Anti-Fraud Plan 22-23 and progress with delivery of 21-22 plan. And we've got Nick Jennings to present that. Good evening, Nick.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, my report covers two topics with separate recommendations. The first is to approve the Council's anti-fraud plan for 22-23, and the second part is to provide the committee with a brief update on the activity undertaken in the current year to protect the Council against fraud and the risk of fraud. Can I just highlight an area in my report first, Chair, regarding the appendices mentioned at page 198. These actually are in reverse order, so they should read Appendix A, Proposed Anti-Fraud Plan, and Appendix B should be the SAF's KPI performance for 2021-22 to December 21. And reference to Appendix B should be made section 4.11 of the report as well. So apologies for those oversights, and hopefully that will assist members in following my report. Section 3 of the report and Appendix A, the proposed anti-fraud plan for 22-23. Members will see the details that are laid out within the plan itself. These have been developed and agreed with officers and follow current best practice and guidance from CIPFRA, NAO, and other organisations. We've structured the plan and activities around the 5 pillars of govern, acknowledge, prevent, pursue, and protect in the Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally strategy, which is recognised as a model for local government in designing an anti-fraud response. When we talk about fraud, of course, this includes bribery, corruption, and money laundering as a whole. So membership of the SAFS partnership for North Herts Council for next year will be £86,165. That's seen an increase of in fees of 2.5% that was agreed by the SAFS board at the end of 2021. Just drawing members' attention really to changes in the plan from the previous year, because we're using a very similar structure to previous years. So changes in the plan focused around the money laundering reporting officer role that will be taken on by SAFS, in particular the money laundering risk assessment, training for staff, and SARS report into the NAO that the SAFS management were responsible for. Working with registered social landlords within the council's boundaries to investigate tenancy fraud, and new arrangements in particular to work with settle housing across the council's boundaries as well. Support for the new county-wide council tax review framework that's now funded entirely by the county council, and the district councils across the county can draw on that, including North Herts District Council. And we're working very closely with the revenue managers to talk about how they can access that framework. And then reviewing the effectiveness and extension of the proposed changes to the Audit Commission's National Fraud Initiative powers to include the use of data for non-fraud related crime and debt recovery as well, which could be a significant benefit to the authority. We've tweaked the KPIs as well. KPI number 3, we've included targets for fraud alerts and dissemination of referrals to third parties. At KPI 4, although we've reduced the number of training sessions we intend to deliver for staff around fraud awareness in 22-23, that is at favour of really extending the use of the iLearning packages that are available and delivery to staff through iLearning, or eLearn, I should say, for fraud awareness, money laundering, etc. But there will be increased support around post-COVID grant schemes and the MLR role for SAFs as well. And the last change to KPIs is around PI 5, which is to improve the quality of cases reported for sanction outcomes. And that's just built into some tweaks that we've got around how we apply sanctions and penalties at North Herts Council where we've identified fraud. Chair, that's the part of the report dealing with the plan for next year. Are you happy for me just to go on to the second part of the report?
Yes, I think please do.
Okay, thank you. So the second part starts with section 4 and it details the activity and outcomes of work undertaken by council officers and the shared anti-fraud service in the current year. So we continue to deploy one of our senior counter-fraud officers to work on reported fraud at the council. And this officer is supported by one of our managers, one of our counter-fraud managers, who works directly with council officers as well on specific projects as they arise, such as the COVID grant schemes. The manager also has access to an accredited financial investigator, data analyst, and another officer who provides much of our fraud prevention training as well. And they support that work across the authority. So our work includes fraud awareness for staff, working with senior management and frontline staff to understand where fraud might occur, and developing technology and the use of data analytics to help us uncover fraud. Between April and December of last year, we've received 70 allegations of fraud against various council services, including council tax support scheme, housing benefit, housing application fraud, grant fraud, and blue badge abuse in the council's car parks as well. The level of reporting slightly reduced on the previous year. We will do some comparison at the end of this year, looking back over the what we've seen at North Herts District Council since 2015, and then comparison with similar authorities within the SAFs partnership as well. Reporting for the public remains high. That's a good indication that the public have got confidence if they report matters of fraud to the council, that those will be investigated, and that's we see that as a real positive. Currently, or so to the end of February, we had 39 live investigations with an estimated loss to the council of around £147,000. We have now, just a slight change to the details in your report, we have now closed 27 cases with a fraud loss or savings to the authority of £179,000. And 5 of those cases are currently with our accredited financial investigator, who's assisting in the recovery through the Proceeds of Crime Act of £52,000 back to the authority. We are still having some issues joint working with the Department for Work and Pensions because of their redeployment of officers, but we're starting to see an improvement in that area. Some of our cases have obviously been delayed over the sort of historically because of the restrictions imposed during the pandemic. But we have now returned to a new business as usual, and this continues to improve, and that assists us greatly when we're conducting interviews or meeting staff or witnesses in relation to the investigations. A lot of the work for officers of the council and the shared anti-fraud service in the previous year is focused on dealing with the output from the NFI exercise 2021. This work's almost complete now. There were over 1,200 matches from the main exercise. And actually, as of the end of last week, we'd cleared, or officers, I should say, cleared 972 of those matches, which is fantastic. We also received 1,200 matches around single person discount and 99 matches that related to potential errors or fraud within grant schemes. We're reasonably confident that the grant issues are largely academic. There's no real fraud in there because we've identified what we believe to be all of the fraud through the grant application through other activity, but we just need to review those matches to provide some additional assurance. Not mentioned in my report is the work that we're undertaking with registered social landlords at the moment, working across the borough. We've actually, of 5 cases we investigated for social landlords, in 21-22. We've recovered 2 properties already, which have been recovered from where the tenant was illegally subletting those properties, and those have subsequently been let to families from the council's housing register. And there are 3 further properties awaiting court action so that we can secure them with a housing provider, and then they can be let as well to North Herts residents. And then, just as I mentioned at the top of my report, the KPIs are at Appendix B. Very pleased to report that they're all on target for delivery or all completed already for the current year. Members can see that in more detail at page 205. At that point, Chair, I'm more than happy to take any questions from members.
Thanks very much, Nick. That's a real body of work there, isn't it? Any questions from members? I've got everybody. Right. Councillor Billing.
Hello. You say there's 70, and I know there are 70 sort of live cases at the moment, and I know that there are that they're in mid investigation. But given going back to past years, how many would you expect to be successful prosecutions and actually recovering the money?
Very few of the allegations that we receive result in prosecutions because the majority of alleged fraud it can be dealt with through other means. So we see prosecution at North Herts really as a only where there's a significant deliberate or organised fraud being committed against the authorities. So the numbers of prosecutions are always very, very low in comparison to how much alleged fraud is investigated. But we probably deal with 2 or 3 more serious cases that will end up in the criminal courts. As far as recovery is concerned, the authority is excellent at recovering any money that's been lost. And we can support that with our financial investigator who's got access to various tools to assist her in recovering money direct from bank accounts, in place restraint orders, and really sort of boosting the council's ability to recover losses. So recovery of losses is excellent. That's got to be the priority for the authority. Prosecutions is, we keep that because it can be quite costly. We keep that as a last resort, really.
Thanks, Nick. Right, Councillor Hone, Terry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on 410 and 411, 410, council officers are reviewing the current fraud prevention policy in particular. I guess that'll come back to us, Chairman, and we'll at least get to see the changes that are going to be made to the fraud prevention policy sometime, will we? There's one question. The second question is, yes, we expect a detailed report on of all counter fraud activity undertaken in 21-22, provided back to us at the next or as early as summer FAR committee meeting, I suppose we're saying here. So as soon as we can. So those 2 questions, really.
I would imagine that would be the case. We've got an item on updated fraud policy, so it might well be brought in on that, and Ian Cooper can advise. I've got Councillor Compton, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. So I had one question which loosely links to tenancy fraud. During the COVID pandemic, we put an awful lot of people into hotel accommodation who were either homeless or claimed they were homeless. Now, I've got no reason to doubt the large majority of that was completely legit. But is there anything that you've got going ahead that's going to just retrospectively check some of those applications just for any potential fraud? And the reason why I say that is because the numbers dropped off so heavily when the hotel accommodation was looking like it was going to stop being funded. So it did look a little bit like people were able to find accommodation exceptionally easily suddenly, and I just wondered if they were being looked into in any way.
Okay, thanks for that. I know we do still have either 15 or 18 still in hotel accommodation. Is it 12 now? Nick, do you have any information on that for us?
Yes, we do. As part of the fraud activity for North Herts Council, we take the housing register. So anybody that's on the housing register, which would include people in temporary accommodation or hotels as well, we're reviewing that data frequently to ensure that if there are any changes in those persons' circumstances, that we identify that quickly and it's reported back to the housing team for them to review.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. Any other points or questions? If not, the recommendations are that the committee approves the anti-fraud plan 22-23 and notes the activity to protect accounts against fraud and corruption in 21-22. So could I please ask you to vote on those recommendations?
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. And thanks once again, Nick, for a very comprehensive report.
Thanks, Chair.
We're on to item 11, which is the updated fraud policy. And that may be the point to bring in Terry Hone's point for anything to be referred back to us. Ian Cooper to present. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the point. So this is a refresh of the fraud prevention policy, a very minor change to it. The only change I've made is to reflect that the shared anti-fraud service will be taking over the money laundering reporting officer role. We never get any MLRO relevant things referred to us, but we have to have the provisions in place in case we do. So it makes a lot of sense for a central point, i.e. SAFs, to do that on our behalf, who can do it across a number of authorities and keep in touch with all the changing legislation and requirements. And they've offered to do that for us free of charge as part of the service they provide. So I am very happy, and we've discussed this committee before, for them to take on that role. So this change of policy reflects that. At the same time, we've also done a review of it and to make sure that we're still happy with what's in there. And I believe that everything in there is still current and still relevant and still at the right level of detail to make sure people are aware what's required of them without it being too long a read to have to go through. So on that basis, I'm bringing the report to you with the proposed changes. The changes are so minor, I probably could have done it without referring to you, but I felt it was appropriate for you to see what the changes you're making and hope to be reassured that we do keep this policy under regular review and that we aren't proposing any changes apart from the few minor ones in front of you. Obviously, you have to take any questions on that, but that is the change that Nick referred to in his report as well.
Thank you, Ian. And Councillor Hone, Terry.
Yeah, I think really, Chairman, it's just to say thank you for bringing that report in front of us, so we do see and learn the changes that happen on that policy, which is quite important to us in this room. So thank you for that. So we now have a better understanding of what we're doing around that particular thing and how the policy is priced. So good that we're updating it and good it's come back to here. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, we'll move to the recommendation. So the recommendation that this committee approve the amended fraud prevention policy as attached in Appendix A. Please vote.
That motion is carried.
Thanks very much indeed, Louis. Thank you. Right, we're now on to item 12, which is the audit plan 22-23, and we have Mark Shortley to present. Good evening, Mark.
Evening, thank you, Chair. I have had a bit of trouble with my microphone over the past couple of meetings I've had on Zoom, so if I do start cutting out, just saying I'll go back to the no headphone option. The purpose of this report is for members to approve the proposed internal audit plan for 22-23. And I'll just run you through the highlights of the report. So on page 39 of your 239 of your reports pack, section 1 just refers to the background for internal audit planning and the professional standards that are applicable during the planning process. On page 242, I'll just run through this in a little bit more detail because our approach to audit planning has been refreshed this year in light of some observations and recommendations that resulted from our external quality assessment that took place in the summer. And this is to bring greater clarity around the basis for inclusion in the plan and to provide more consistency in how we record what's included in the plans across our partners. So the paragraph 2.2, this just outlines the 5 stages of our planning process. So we have horizon scanning, building the audit universe, discussions with officers, risk assessment, and then the production of the draft plan. The first 3 phases of this are broadly similar to what we've done in previous years and to what I've walked through in previous years for the committee. The main changes take place on page 243 from paragraph 2.6 onwards. And this seeks to explain how we risk assess any audit topics within the audit universe. The overarching risk that we're looking at it against is that the audit plan doesn't provide sufficient coverage or significance insofar that it would affect our overall opinion at the end of the year, and that may not be robust. So to address this, we've assessed each of the topics in the audit universe against the following criteria 1 to 4 at paragraph 2.7. So financial materiality, corporate significance, vulnerability and change, and management concern. In addition to this, we've considered where assurance already exists across the 3 lines. So from management, from other assurance providers, or previous internal audit work that we've undertaken. And we've used this to adjust the risk score for each topic. So if there's been a high level of assurance previously provided over a topic in the audit universe, that will reduce the overall risk score in that area because we have some confidence in the risk management, internal control and governance arrangements there already. The topics that are then categorised as high priority, so they're the audit topics categorised into high, medium and low priority. So any that are classified as high priority, these are the ones that are deemed crucial to provide an annual opinion and therefore will be included within the draft plan. SIAS is then committed to delivering at least 8 of the medium priority audits, the subject of which will be approved by this committee as part of this report and then ongoing on a quarter-by-quarter basis. To allow for flexibility within the plan and to enable us to kind of respond to any emerging or new risks or significant areas. On page 246, the table at paragraph 2.15 just outlines the spread of days across the various different types of audit. And then I will move you down to page 248 in section 3. And this outlines the performance management framework that SIAS will be measured against. The performance indicators that are included in there are broadly similar to previous years, but we have updated the descriptions to better align to the information that's provided against each one. And these were approved by the SIAS board in December. Appendix A provides details of all the audits that were rated as high or medium priority, as well as a description of the IT audits, any consultancy engagements that we've agreed, and the grant certifications that are to be completed during 22-23. And Appendix B provides a timetable of when each audit is due to be started. As I previously mentioned, with regard to the medium priority audits that SIAS will conduct during quarters 1 and 2, that's what I'm looking for approval for from this committee today as part of the approval of the overall plan. Myself and Service Director of Resources have had a conversation around some of the areas that we feel are perhaps more high risk than others. And in quarter 1, this kind of centres around the compliance contract and the handling difficult customers policy. Equally, we're open to discussions at this committee as if there's any appetite for either of the other 2 topics that are included in quarter 1. In terms of quarter 2, we definitely feel that the revenues, discounts and exemptions should be completed given the volume of transactions there. But we do need to agree on which further audits we will conduct in quarter 2. So that concludes my overview. I'm happy to take any questions or discuss the medium priority audits that we could do during quarters 1 and 2.
Thanks very much, Mark. Any comments or questions from members? Councillor Compton, Adam.
Thank you. Sorry, Mark, it was just one question on the high priority audits. I missed when you said they were starting. I was under the impression they were starting quarters 1 and 2.
So the high priority ones are included in the timetable at Appendix B, and they're spread across the year.
Sorry, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll move the recommendation that the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee approve the proposed North Herts Council internal audit plan for 22-23.
Chair. Sorry, Chair, can I interject?
Yeah, please do.
So we will need to agree the medium priority audits to be done in Q1 and Q2. If you're happy with the proposal put forward, Mark, which is that they are the compliance contract and handling difficult customers policy in Q1, and the revenue discounts and exemptions in Q2 is to agree one other for Q2. If you want to take, I suppose my recommendation might be we focus on ledger services potentially as the other ones do in Q2, but we will need to do that so SIAS can start to plan their audits and their resourcing for those.
Okay, and sorry, it wasn't on my script, so I'm happy to do that as a proposal, if that helps.
All recommendations coming up from the office.
Yeah. Okay. So we're approving what's just been said forward. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You care to vote on that?
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Ian, for that. Do I now go back to the actual recommendation then? That we approve the proposed North Herts Council internal audit plan? I think I will anyway then.
Yeah, do that.
So
yes.
Can you vote on that, please? Yeah.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And so we go to the next item, which is the audit update report, which is Mark again.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the approval on the plan as well. Appreciate that. So the SIAS progress report just details our progress to year to date. It's a fairly brief update from me today. Just draw your attention to page 258 at paragraph 2.5. This outlines a limited number of plan changes that have taken place since the last committee in December. Sticking on page 258, I just wanted to provide you with some updated performance data. The total number of billable days completed as of today is 233 out of 270, which is 86% versus the target of 95%. And for projects, there's 20 projects out of 26, given a percentage of 77%. Whilst performance to date is quite strong and it's at the higher end of the SIAS partnership in comparison to other partners, I just wanted to make the committee aware that it is unlikely that we'll meet the 95% target for projects to draft report this year. At this moment in time, I'm anticipating we'll deliver all but 2 projects, which will bring the percentage to 92%. Our main focus throughout Q4 of this year has been ensuring that we've completed that a sufficient amount of work has been completed across the partnership to enable us to provide an overall opinion at each partner. And I certainly believe we're on course to do that at North Herts, so there's no issues there. But given we're so close to the end of the year, I did want to make the committee aware that it's unlikely that we'll hit that 95% target for draft reports. And that's the end of my update. Just the final thing I wanted to say is this is going to be my last committee meeting at North Herts. I'm leaving SIAS on the 31st of March. So I just wanted to thank the committee for all their support and input over the last 3 or 4 years that I've been managing the North Herts contract. So thank you very much.
Well, and thank you, Mark, as well. And I think the fact that you've pointed out to us that even though we might only make 92%, that's still at the top end of various other organisations within the shared service. Right, Councillor Hone-Terry.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the question is, what are the 2 that we expect not to be able to do in this period? Two audits, which we said 92%, and there was 2 missing. What were those 2? Might be in the report, but I can't see it.
No, it's not in the report. You're right. It's one of them is the ways of working that was due to start in Q4, and I don't anticipate that that will be completed. It hasn't yet started, so that there's very slim possibility that will be completed. And the other one that I think is at risk is the health and safety of lone workers, where we're looking at environmental health and housing. That is underway and is in field work, but given we've got kind of 15 calendar days left, that one's very much at risk of not being completed. But I should point out that any work that isn't completed is the key priority in April. So the hope is that by the end of April, and certainly by the end of May, when we give our opinion, that the 2 projects that I don't think will be completed should have been done by then.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Right, Councillor Compton, Adam.
I just wanted to say thank you. Good luck with your future endeavours. That's you've been very helpful doing these reports for the year I've been here, so thank you. Just following on from Terry's point there, lone working is obviously quite a high priority for us to make sure our staff are safe. Is there any reason why that's been delayed or is taking longer than expected during field work? Because I'm just slightly concerned, given the current situation, that should be as high a priority as possible.
Yeah, it was always scheduled to take place in Q4. We have done one half of this already last year, where we looked at parking and planning. The reason we didn't look at environmental health and housing kind of this time last year was the pressures of the pandemic were still very much on those teams. I'm anticipating a lot of the work will be done. It will be the reporting aspect that may not make the 31st. So a large chunk of the work will be done, and half the work has already been done in a previous report anyway. So this is just to make sure that the areas that tend to work in a lone working environment more commonly are kind of within the scope of our review. So it's taking place as scheduled. It's, at this stage of the year, we've got there's competing priorities all over the place, unfortunately, and sometimes it comes down to the workload of the auditor that's been allocated that piece of work. But I have got confidence that most of the field work will be done this year, and it should just be the report that gets issued early next year.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Okay, if there are no other points, then we'll move to the recommendations, which were to note the Shared Internal Audit Service Progress Report for the period to the 18th of February, and to note the plan amendments to the 21-22 Annual Audit Plan. If you could please vote.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much. And with all our very best wishes, Mark, we will now move on to item 14, which is the risk management update, and it's Ian Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is essentially quite a very short report. We have been doing the usual risk management review activity throughout the quarter, but we're not actually recommending any changes to any of the corporate risks in this quarter. Part of that stems from the fact that, as you'll see later in the agenda, we're looking at the council delivery plan and how that links into risk. So in light of that, we sort of have taken a bit of lighter touch in terms of risk reviews, but we have still been keeping on top of the corporate risks and looking at them. But in essence, we've seen no need to change any of the risk scores in this quarter. So on that basis, obviously happy to take any questions, but no recommendation really for you apart from to note the report.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Got a couple of questions here. Councillor Compton, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Ian. I just had one question in particular about something that I feel maybe should have been added, or at least discussed, and it might not be in this report, which is not specifically to do with the war in Ukraine, but the knock-on effects to various supply chains, various issues around things like catalyst converters for vans. Fleet vehicles are becoming quite extensively delayed. fuel prices have gone up, so on and so forth. So has there been any sort of look into what the financial impact is on the council in the immediate term, particularly around the supply chain, and should it maybe go on as a, you know, an impact here somewhere or not? Because to me, it seems like it should be something that should be added.
Yeah, I completely agree with something we start to look into what the impacts could be. Obviously, in terms of the council itself, we have very limited sort of fleet. We have a few vehicles here and there. But obviously, our contractors do have large numbers of vehicles, particularly obviously our waste contractor. At the moment, they are continuing delivering services, and we expect them to be able to continue to do that. The financial impact on the council will come about through the inflationary increase, which does have an element of fuel in it, in fact, quite a large element of fuel in it. And that is done each year in line with the contract renewal date of sort of the contract anniversary date in May. So yes, we are expecting that to be a big impact, but won't know exactly what it will be until we get all the indicators through at the time, because these indicators obviously are moving up and down at quite phenomenal rates at the moment. So yes, it's definitely something we're looking at and keeping an eye on, both in terms of the financial impact and ensuring we can continue to deliver services. I think at the next risk management group, we would have a good conversation around whether it sort of meets the threshold for a corporate risk as something to do that, or, you know, essentially also it's kind of just it sort of moves from being a risk to an actuality, and it's just around managing the situation rather than the risk at that point. So we'll keep an eye on it and reflect it accordingly, but it's definitely something from an officer perspective we are keeping an eye on.
Thanks, Ian. And just to follow up to that, one thing I forgot to mention was the gas and electricity contract that the council's got. I know we contract with West Mercia because I've had a look at the contracts register. Do you happen to know if they buy their gas in particular from Gazprom? Quite a lot of district councils and local authorities have been going through Gazprom contracts, which obviously is a little bit at risk at the moment.
Yeah, we have checked, and West Mercia do not buy any electricity or gas from Gazprom.
Perfect, thank you.
A good point to make, and I'm sure we'll be keeping a watching eye on it. Councillor Billing Clare.
Yeah, mine was exactly the same point, and the cost of, I mean, you'd said about the cost of petrol, but obviously the cost of electricity and gas is gonna rocket soon, April, and then again in October. So I would echo your views that there should be more of a risk considered on the war in Ukraine.
Thank you. Well, with those ominous thoughts, if there are no further questions, I'll move to the recommendation, which is that the committee notes that there were no changes to corporate risk scores in this quarter. So if you can just vote to note.
The motion is carried.
Thanks, Lee. Right. Agenda item 15 is the third quarter budget monitoring 21-22, and that's back to Ian again.
Thank you, Chair. Standard quarterly report. So this is a report that goes to Cabinet. So it is up to this committee to make any comments or suggestions to Cabinet on it, but the recommendations themselves are for Cabinet to approve. So just to note that in terms of when we get to recommendations, it's just for you to note the report and make any comments to Cabinet. In terms of content report, it's the same structure as normal. So if we scoot down to table 3, which is on page 273 of the report pack, we've got the usual list of the various variances, both up and down, against budget in this quarter. And you'll note that the overall impact in this year is a £500,000 decrease in spend, but noting that of that, about 200,000 of that is requested to carry forward, so it relates to projects that haven't happened this year but requested to take place next year. Other things sort of to quickly note, paragraph 8.14, which is on page 278, combined with table 5. If you add those numbers together in that table there, you get the overall impact of COVID-19 in terms of additional expenditure and lost income not covered by the government sales fees and charges compensation scheme. Together that totals 1.5 million. I suppose that was probably about where we end up at the end of this year. So that's the impact this council had to face and fund from various reserves and general fund. In terms of general fund and looking at table 6, you will note that the forecast general fund balance is an increase, both compared to the beginning of the year and also compared to the forecast for the end of the year previously. I would note that within that number, there's quite a contribution coming from other reserves to make up that increase in that general fund reserve, and that basically is bringing in a lot of our other reserves into the general funds to shore it up to make sure it is sustainable in the longer term. As discussed when we set the budget back in February, I have no issues there in terms of that number. It's a healthy cushion at the moment, but it will get eroded over time as we probably will face declining funding situation over the next few years. But just to note why that number is as it is. Apart from that, wasn't there anything else to report, but as ever, always have to take any questions in terms of the detail of that report.
Thank you very much. Any questions to the officer? No. Okay. The recommendations before us are: we are recommending to Cabinet to approve the changes to the general fund budget as identified in Table 3 in paragraph 8.2, 510k decrease in net expenditure, and recommended to Cabinet to approve the changes to 22-23 general fund budget as identified in Table 3 in paragraph 8.2, a total 238k increase in net expenditure. So would you please vote?
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much, which now brings us to agenda item 16 and Ian, again, the third quarter investment strategy.
Thank you, Chair, again. And again, this is the same similar format to usual. And again, all the recommendations are to Cabinet to approve, but I'm sure they will always, as ever, welcome your comments and feedback on the report. So in terms of a brief skip through the contents of it, so table 2 on page 286 through to 287 are the various capital schemes that haven't quite taken place this year. So and therefore the Cabinet requested to allow them to sort of move into next year and move the budget across between the 2 years. And then table 3, starting on 288, part of it is around the section 106 projects as they are identified. The capital budget is updated to reflect those projects and the spend in relation to that. And also the North Herts Leisure Centre sauna refurbishment, which is approved by council as part of the budget setting process, but just noted here just to make sure the numbers add up and it is completely transparent what's going on. I suppose I have to point out in paragraph 8.9, we do mention there the small breach of the Treasury strategy. Obviously, they were mitigating, there were circumstances outside of control. We had an IT issue on the day, and we're expecting it, obviously, as is usual, is that we have a little IT issues from time to time, and they get resolved quite quickly, usually, by our great team at the council. But in this instant, it was a bit slower getting resolved and wasn't until late afternoon that issue was resolved and we had access to the network again. So that the impact of that was that we were too late for the cut-offs for moving the funds off of our current account in time for the various timings. So the balance on the account was too high for overnight for one night. If we'd known it'd be down for a long time, we would obviously try to put mitigation actions in place and try to probably come into the office and send some faxes or something, or whatever the process might be in this age where actually you rely on technology quite a lot. But it just turned out we couldn't do that on this occasion. So just have to report that to you. Also moving on to paragraph 8.11, and in terms of the rate of interest we're earning, you'll note that as at the end of the third quarter, the income in terms of investment yields is very low. The yields are increasing with the change to the Bank of England base rate now got to 0.5%. We are seeing rates, the giddy heights of 0.5% for DMO short-term investments, and even our current account is now paying us 0.4% interest. So that's why the forecast at the end of the year is so much higher than the interest earned the first 3 quarters. The balances that we've got invested are similar, but we're probably looking at about a 4 times increase in some of the average yields in terms of yield compared to that previous 3 quarters. Apart from that, obviously got the rest of the content of the report as well as the appendix, which is going into a lot more detail. And again, happy to take any questions you have on the report.
Thanks very much, Ian. 0.5% interest, I remember the days. Right, any questions? Yes, we have some questions. Councillor Compton, Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, I think it was in my first FAR meeting that we went through the investment strategy and we looked at foreign investments, and that in fact we don't currently have any, but there was a possibility of them. I can't remember what the requirements were, but could I ask that officers have a look at that in light of, again, sorry to mention it, the Ukraine war, but if Russia were to default on any debt, then there could be quite a credit run across a number of European countries. And I just wanted to know if that could sort of just be looked into and noted somewhere.
Yes, in terms of the criteria, our criteria are very high. So we set a country criteria, which is very high, far above the UK criteria. And we also set a high quality institution criteria as well for anything that's outside the UK. And it also has to be in sterling as well. So it's in relation in sterling and not in any other currency, which basically limits it to a very few options. The most likely one is that some of the Australia and New Zealand banks might be on the list soon, but apart from that, there's not a lot of options that meet our criteria. If they do, we'll look at them because it does provide that additional level of diversification, and probably some of those institutions might be more immune to some of the impacts of Ukraine than potentially the UK banking system is in anyway.
No, I quite agree. They're quite far away, and I think you're right there. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Billing-Clare.
Sorry, I've got a bit lost on my pages. 296, that's not yet, is it? Is this 16? Item 16?
Well, yeah.
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 Okay, so I can talk about page 296. Yeah, it was just the John Barker Place payment money that's going to be spent. I just wondered when that was going to be, because it's in for this year. Is that going out this year?
It's in for 2022-23. So it's in from next financial year. So next from the 1st of April onwards. And yes, we're expecting it to go out in that year. It is contingent on delivery of additional accommodation or part of that development, and we expect that to be delivered and therefore be payable next year after 1st of April.
All right, thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, we can move to recommendations. Recommendations that this committee recommends to Cabinet to note the forecast expenditure of 2.424 million in 21-22 on the capital programme. Recommended to Cabinet to approve the adjustments to the capital programme as a result of the revised timetable of schemes, and committee recommended to Cabinet to note the position of the availability of capital resources as detailed. And finally, that the committee recommends to Cabinet to note the position of Treasury management activity as at the end of December 2021. If we could vote on that, please.
The motion is carried.
But we knew you were with us, so thank you very much. Right, brings us to item 17. Back to you, Ian, for tax compliance framework.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just to really inform committee what we're doing and to provide any comments and feedback on what we're doing. So HMRC have something they call a tax strategy, which I don't really think is a strategy, but it's what they call it. And whilst we as a council are not required to produce a tax strategy, we are going to do one. The reason for doing that is that it is good practice to do so, but also by doing one, it gives us a named contact at HMRC, which makes it a bit easier to ask them questions and find out what's going on, rather than sort of ending up in the potentially slight black hole of HMRC at times. So that's why we're doing it. So what is before you is the sort of draft tax compliance framework. and it will be subject to SIAS, who are, I think, actually now looking at it and giving some feedback on it to us. So there might be a few changes as a result of that, but subject to that feedback, which I will obviously reflect in before we submit it into the HMRC, and any comments from this committee, we will, in sort of fairly short order, be submitting it to HMRC. We will, as required by HMRC, publish it on our website. I don't think it'll be put in the most prominent place on the website. I don't think it'll have that level of interest, but we will make sure it's available for those that do want to find it. But yeah, I'm sure there's more interesting things on our website people do want to read. So bring it here to you to the committee for any feedback and comments.
Thank you very much, Ian. Are there any notes? It seems not, and it does say best practice, so that's always something we like to follow. The recommendation that the committee comment on and note the proposed tax compliance framework. So if you could please vote on that.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much, which brings us to the council delivery plan, agenda item 18, and Ian, your final presentation of the evening, I think.
Yeah, final items are for me. I'm always at the end of these lists of items. So we've discussed the council delivery plan before in terms of the proposal around doing it and what the implications are. So this is the version of the council delivery plan for 22-23, which has been discussed by overview and scrutiny last night, given your chance to comment on it now, and subject to approval by cabinet next week. Mainly it will be for overview and scrutiny to look at during the year, but because of the link to risk being brought to you to look at as well in terms of setting it and the implications thereof. So I guess you've got the two appendices in there. Appendix A is the proposed council delivery plan with all the various projects and risks on it, and Appendix B is the list of risks and PIs that have been previously reported both to yourselves in terms of risk and to overview and scrutiny in terms of performance indicators that will not be reported in 22-23. In terms of those risks, most of them are ones that I think have either been superseded or are essentially a bit outdated now, not needed anymore. I mean, the one of note really is the cyber risk one. It doesn't really fit in directly into a council delivery plan, but obviously is still, and probably increasingly so, a risk to the council, whilst not a direct impact on delivery of any of our projects or our work. The indirect potential implications are significant. So whilst it's not being reported, we are still definitely taking it seriously, and it will definitely still be a service level risk of the highest order. But it just doesn't quite fit into the framework that we've set out of how we do the council delivery plan. But hopefully that kind of reassures you that we're not thinking it's not gone away, and we do take it seriously. Apart from that, your role, as agreed previously, will be to revert to more looking at the way risk is managed and monitored, and the processes therein, rather than the individual risks on this basis going forward. Which then gives hopefully overview and scrutiny a chance to look more in detail at the implications of risk and how they affect service delivery, which I think is more their role than this committee focused on the detail, and potentially at times we duplicate the effort that overview and scrutiny are doing. As ever, happy to go into more detail on any of the elements of the report or the appendices, but that's the overview I want to provide to you tonight.
Many thanks, Ian. Any questions for Ian? No, and I think overview and scrutiny gave it a fairly detailed look at last night. So our recommendation is that this committee recommends to Cabinet to consider and formally approve council delivery plan and any associated targets, which will be monitored throughout the forthcoming civic year by the overview and scrutiny committee. So if I could ask you to vote, please.
That motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. And that brings us to the final item, which says possible agenda items for future meetings. Oh, sorry, can I just thank Ian for all his work on this? as well. I meant to do that earlier. But moving on to that final item, I think this is our last meeting of this civic year, isn't it? So it might be a bit presumptuous of me to set possible agenda items for anybody next year, and that will be for them to do as soon as we meet after May. So unless anybody's got anything burning issue that they think FAR should, Terry.
Well, I think it got mentioned 2 or 3 times was the impact of Ukraine and the Ukraine war and the price of energy could have an impact, and so therefore it's something which we would want to get involved in, something we should monitor. To what degree and what lengths, Chairman, I'll leave in the capable hands of the Chairman, but certainly it's something which we should be monitoring and should be least involved in somewhere along the line.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks. Just to carry on that, I got Ian's point about a risk becoming a likelihood about the risks of Ukraine. So maybe we could have a paper that is separate, just literally stating, what the additional increase in costs may be over the short term and any estimated long term, just in case there is any budgetary implications to it long term.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I was fairly confident in Ian's answer that we were certainly going to be looking at that in May, but we can make a formal request to have that paper brought to FAR in May to see what the potential impacts are, or certainly to get an update. All right, thank you very much. Okay, with that done, I thank everybody for their attendance and support during the year, and see you at the next meeting of whatever it is, full council, I think, next week. All right, thanks very much. Thanks to the staff here as well. Thank you.